Aquarius, I hope you're ready because what I'm picking up around your energy right now feels deeply emotional. Honestly, this doesn't feel like a passing thought or a temporary connection. It feels like someone has been carrying your energy with them for much longer than they've been willing to admit. The interesting thing is, the more this person tried to make sense of what they were feeling, the more confusing it became. It's almost as if their heart kept arriving at a truth their mind wasn't quite prepared to accept. So today, we're going to take a closer look at what's unfolding here. We're going to see why your presence has remained so strong in someone's world and what may be shifting beneath the surface of this connection. Welcome in, my beautiful Aquarius friends. I'm so grateful you're here. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome. My name is Henry. Let's settle into this energy together and see what the cards have to reveal about the thoughts, emotions, and unspoken feelings surrounding this connection. Okay, the first thing that immediately catches my attention is how unusual this feels. You know, sometimes when I sit down and connect with a reading, the energy feels familiar. It follows patterns I've seen before. But this one feels different. It's almost like somebody met you and quietly lost their sense of certainty. I'm looking at the star, and what I'm hearing is that this person keeps trying to understand why you stand out so much in their memory. Not because you're constantly around them, not because you're demanding attention. Actually, it feels quite the opposite. The more space there is between the two of you, the more noticeable your absence becomes. And that's what seems to be confusing them, because I don't feel like this person expected that. I feel like they have met attractive people before. They've met interesting people before. They've met people who caught their attention before. Yet something about you settled into a deeper place. You know when you hear a song one time and somehow it stays in your head for weeks? It feels a little bit like that, except this isn't a song. It's you, your energy, your voice, the way you think, the way you see the world, the way you seem completely comfortable being different. And honestly, Aquarius, I think that's part of what keeps pulling them back towards you mentally. I'm also noticing the moon sitting here. And wow, this person has spent a lot of time inside their own head. A lot. I keep seeing someone lying awake when everything around them is quiet, trying to explain away their feelings, trying to convince themselves that they're overthinking, trying to find a logical reason for why they keep thinking about the same person. But every explanation seems to create another question. It's almost like every road somehow leads back to you. And I don't think they expected that either. Because what I'm feeling here isn't somebody rushing toward emotion. This feels like somebody who prefers certainty, somebody who likes answers, somebody who likes knowing exactly where they stand. Yet whenever they think about you, certainty becomes a little harder to find. The energy becomes softer, less structured, more emotional, and that's where things become interesting. Because I'm seeing the Two of Swords. And honestly, this card feels less like a decision and more like resistance. Not resistance toward you. Resistance toward what they're feeling. I keep hearing this person say, "Why am I thinking about them again?" And then a few days later, they're asking the exact same question. It's almost funny in a way. Because every attempt to create distance somehow brings their attention right back to the connection. Some of you may not even realize how often you cross this person's mind. You may be going about your day completely unaware. Meanwhile, they're seeing reminders of you in the strangest places. A song, a conversation, a place they pass, a random memory that surfaces out of nowhere. And each time it happens, there is this brief moment where they pause, almost like they're trying to figure out why. But instead of finding an answer, they find another feeling, another memory, another layer, another reason they can't quite let the thought go. And then I see the Six of Cups. This is where the energy becomes incredibly tender, because underneath all the analysis, underneath all the mental back and forth, there is something surprisingly innocent here. I don't mean immature, I mean genuine. This person may not talk about it openly. They may not even fully understand it themselves. But when they think about you, their energy softens. The walls come down a little. The pressure they normally place on themselves seems to disappear. For a moment, they stop trying to control everything, and they simply feel. That's why I don't think this connection fits neatly into any category they've tried to place it in. Because every time they attempt to define it, it seems to become something larger than the definition. Every time they try to move on mentally, another memory appears. Every time they try to focus elsewhere, your energy quietly returns, not loudly, not dramatically, just consistently. Like a thought that refuses to leave because it still has something left to say. And honestly, Aquarius, what fascinates me most is that this person doesn't seem frustrated by that anymore. At first, maybe, but now, the energy feels different. Now it feels more like curiosity, more like acceptance, more like somebody standing in front of a feeling they can no longer dismiss quite so easily. Because the star is still here, the moon is still here, and that Two of Swords doesn't feel as firm as it once did. Something about this person's inner world feels as though it's beginning to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough for them to start looking at this connection through a different lens than they did before. And as I continue looking at these cards, I can't help but notice that another layer of the story is beginning to reveal itself. Something about this person's perspective feels much bigger than simple attraction. That's what keeps standing out to me as I sit with these cards. Because as the star continues to shine through this reading, I'm not just seeing admiration, I'm seeing inspiration, and there is a difference. You can admire someone from a distance and never allow them to change you. You can find someone attractive and continue living exactly the same way. This feels different. This feels like somebody looking at Aquarius and quietly realizing that their world may be larger than they once believed. You know, I keep getting this image of someone standing at the edge of a coastline, staring out at the horizon. Not because they know exactly what's out there, but because something inside them is curious enough to wonder. That's where this energy feels like it lives. Curiosity, possibility, expansion. And honestly, Aquarius, I think part of the reason this person keeps returning to your energy is because you challenge them without even trying. Not through arguments, not through pressure, not through expectations, just by being yourself. There is something about the way you think that doesn't fit neatly into conventional boxes. You seem comfortable asking questions other people avoid. You seem comfortable exploring ideas that other people dismiss. And whether you've realized it or not, this person notices that. I feel like there have been moments where they walked away from conversations with you and continued thinking about them days later, not because you were trying to impress them. Actually, I don't think that's your style at all. It's because something you said lingered. Something about your perspective stayed with them. And every time they revisit those memories, the star keeps appearing, almost like a quiet reminder that your influence reaches further than you may realize. Okay, and this is where things become really interesting because I can see the Three of Wands stepping into the reading. This card feels alive. It feels like movement in someone's imagination. I keep seeing somebody daydreaming, not necessarily about specific events, not necessarily about detailed plans, just possibilities. What if? Those two words feel important. What if we work together on something? What if we spent more time together? What if we actually understand each other better than I initially thought? What if this connection has more depth than I originally gave it credit for? The questions seem endless, but unlike before, these questions don't feel confusing. They feel exciting, and that's a major shift in energy. Because this person isn't just looking at who you are today. They're looking at who you could become. They're looking at what could be created when two people share similar values, similar visions, or similar dreams. Honestly, I don't think this is somebody who sees you as just another chapter. I think they're beginning to view you as somebody whose presence changes the direction of the story. And wow, the Two of Cups is sitting right beside all of this. What fascinates me about that is how equal everything feels. There isn't an energy of somebody trying to save the other person. There isn't an energy of somebody needing to fix the other person. What I see is mutual respect. I see somebody recognizing pieces of themselves in you, not identical pieces, complementary ones, the kind that create balance, the kind that create understanding. You know, I think this person may have spent a lot of their life around relationships that felt transactional, relationships where expectations were heavy, relationships where people wanted something from them, relationships where they constantly had to prove themselves. This feels softer. It feels easier, not because it's simple, but because they don't feel the need to become somebody else around you. And honestly, that realization seems to surprise them. Because when they imagine conversations with you, there is a sense of relief. When they think about sharing ideas with you, there is curiosity. When they think about building something alongside you, there is excitement. And that's where the Four of Wands starts catching my attention. This card feels warm. It feels welcoming. Almost like somebody picturing a place where they can finally exhale. A place where they don't need to wear armor all the time. A place where they can simply be themselves. I keep feeling that this person isn't only attracted to who Aquarius is. They're attracted to the atmosphere around you. The energy, the freedom, the openness, the feeling that life doesn't have to stay exactly as it is. Because every time they think about you, their vision seems to stretch a little further. Their imagination travels a little farther. Their hopes become a little bigger. And I know that sounds incredibly simple. But for somebody who may have spent years limiting their expectations, that's a profound experience. There's something beautiful about encountering a person who reminds you that your future doesn't have to look exactly like your past. And that's what keeps surfacing here. Not fantasy, not illusion, inspiration. I think that's the word I've been searching for. You inspire this person. Maybe more than they fully understand. And the fascinating thing is that they may not even tell you that. Some people don't immediately express admiration. Some people process it quietly, internally, privately. They sit with it, they observe it, they try to understand it. And that's exactly what feels like it's happening here. Because every time they picture the road ahead, Aquarius somehow appears somewhere in the image, not forcing their way into the picture, just naturally existing within it. Like somebody who belongs there, like somebody whose energy has become woven into the possibilities they're beginning to explore. And as these cards continue opening up, I can't help but feel there is another layer beneath all of this inspiration, because admiration has a way of revealing hidden fears right before somebody is ready to face them. Honestly, Aquarius, the energy begins to feel a little heavier here, not in a bad way, just deeper. Like somebody standing in front of a door they've avoided opening for a very long time. And the moment I look down, I see the devil. What strikes me isn't the card itself, it's the feeling surrounding it. I keep sensing someone becoming aware of patterns they used to justify. Patterns they told themselves were normal, comfortable, necessary, even when those patterns quietly made them unhappy. You know, sometimes people get so used to carrying certain fears that they stop questioning them. They simply build their life around them. That's what this feels like. This person may have spent years convincing themselves that staying where they were was easier than confronting what was missing, easier than taking emotional risks, easier than admitting they wanted something different. But something has changed. Because the energy around Aquarius keeps acting like a mirror, and mirrors can be uncomfortable. Not because they show us something wrong, because they show us something true. I feel like this person has started noticing how often they compromise themselves to keep other people comfortable, how often they silence their own feelings to avoid conflict, how often they choose familiarity over authenticity. And wow, that realization doesn't feel small. It feels disruptive. The kind of realization that quietly follows somebody everywhere. They're driving home and thinking about it. They're sitting alone and thinking about it. They're having conversations with other people and still thinking about it. Because once you see something clearly, it's hard to pretend you didn't see it. And that's exactly where the tower begins appearing. Okay, this doesn't feel dramatic in the way people usually imagine. I'm not seeing chaos. I'm seeing clarity, unexpected clarity. The kind that arrives when a story you've been telling yourself suddenly stops making sense. I keep hearing someone say, wait a second, almost like they're looking around their own life differently, questioning things they never questioned before, looking at relationships differently, looking at priorities differently, looking at themselves differently. And honestly, Aquarius, I think your presence has played a role in that. Not because you've forced anything, not because you've asked them to change, but because you've shown them another possibility. And once somebody sees another possibility, they can no longer pretend it's invisible. That's why this feels like a deeply personal awakening, because the conflict isn't happening between this person and other people. The conflict is happening inside them. Part of them wants the familiar. Part of them wants the truth. Part of them wants to stay exactly where they've always been. Part of them is beginning to wonder what life might look like if they stop settling. And wow, that word keeps coming through. Settling. I think this person has settled in ways they didn't fully recognize before. Maybe they settled for situations that felt safe. Maybe they settled for expectations that belonged to other people. Maybe they settled for identities they outgrew years ago. Whatever it is, it feels like they're beginning to outgrow it. And that's where death enters the reading. There's something remarkably quiet about this card here. I don't feel fear around it. I feel release. Almost like somebody standing at the edge of a season that has finally run its course. You know when autumn arrives and certain leaves simply let go? They don't argue. They don't fight the process. They just release. That's the image I'm seeing. This person is becoming aware of things they can no longer carry forward. Old fears, old stories, old versions of themselves. And the strange thing is that they don't seem angry about it. A little emotional? Sure. A little uncertain? Absolutely. But beneath all of that, there is relief, because maintaining a life that no longer feels aligned takes enormous energy, and I think they're tired. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, tired of pretending, tired of shrinking themselves, tired of explaining away what they feel, tired of ignoring what keeps calling their attention. And as these cards continue opening, I can see the Eight of Cups appearing in the distance. This card feels incredibly personal, because nobody is pushing them. Nobody is dragging them away from anything. The choice feels internal. It feels like somebody slowly realizing they deserve to be honest with themselves. And honesty can be scary, especially when you've spent a long time building your life around avoiding it. I keep getting this image of someone standing alone at night, looking out a window, reflecting on years of decisions, not with regret, more with understanding. Almost like they're finally connecting dots that never made sense before. And Aquarius, I don't think they expected your energy to affect them this deeply. I really don't. I think they assumed they could place this connection into a convenient category and move on. Yet the more they tried to do that, the more the connection kept revealing deeper layers, until eventually it stopped being about attraction. It stopped being about curiosity. It stopped being about temporary emotions. The focus shifted inward, toward themselves, toward the parts of their life that no longer fit, toward the questions they had been avoiding, toward the truths they hadn't fully spoken aloud. And that's why this energy feels so important. Not because somebody suddenly has all the answers. Actually, I don't think they do. But they seem much more willing to sit with the questions than they were before. And that willingness is creating movement. Subtle movement. Quiet movement. The kind that often happens beneath the surface long before anybody else notices. Because as I continue laying these cards down, I can feel another energy beginning to emerge. One that seems connected to the way this person has been watching Aquarius more closely than they may ever admit. There's something incredibly quiet about this energy, not hidden in a secretive way. More like somebody standing across the room, noticing details nobody else pays attention to. Because the moment I see the hermit, I don't feel distance, I feel observation. I feel somebody paying attention. And honestly, Aquarius, I think this person has spent more time watching your growth than you realize. Not necessarily in an obvious way. Not necessarily through direct communication. It feels subtler than that. Almost like they've been collecting little pieces of who you are over time. A comment you made, a decision you made, a challenge you faced, a version of yourself that emerged after something difficult. And each piece seems to have left an impression. You know, I keep seeing somebody scrolling through memories in their mind, not because they're stuck in the past, because they're trying to understand how you became who you are. Because from their perspective, there is something remarkably resilient about you. And I don't think it's perfection they're noticing. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think they're noticing the fact that you've had to work through things. You've had disappointments. You've had moments where life probably didn't go according to plan. Yet somehow, you kept moving. You kept evolving. And that's where strength starts appearing in the reading. Wow, this card feels deeply personal. Because the strength they're seeing isn't loud. It's not somebody standing on a stage demanding attention. It's the kind of strength that develops privately. The kind that comes from surviving experiences nobody fully understands. I keep feeling that this person admires the way you carry yourself. Not because they think your life is easy, because they suspect it wasn't. There is something about your energy that tells them you've had to learn lessons the hard way. You've had to outgrow certain versions of yourself. You've had to find your footing more than once. And honestly, Aquarius, I think that inspires them, more than they would probably admit out loud. Because every time they compare who you are today to who you may have been years ago, they see growth. Every time they observe how you handle situations, they see maturity. Every time they watch you continue moving forward despite obstacles, they see courage, and that's creating something unexpected inside them. Respect, deep respect, the kind that develops slowly, the kind that becomes stronger over time, the kind that doesn't disappear after a few emotions come and go. Okay, and the energy shifts slightly when the Nine of Pentacles appears. Because this card feels like the version of Aquarius they can't stop thinking about. The independent version, the self-sufficient version, the version that doesn't seem to need external validation in order to feel valuable. I think this person finds that fascinating, because so many people spend their lives chasing approval, trying to fit in, trying to become what everyone else expects them to be. Yet when they look at you, they see someone who seems increasingly comfortable occupying their own space. And honestly, that can be incredibly attractive. Not just romantically, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. There is something magnetic about a person who knows who they are becoming. And I keep hearing this person think, how did they get there? Not with jealousy, with curiosity. Because whatever journey you've been on appears to have left a mark, a beautiful one. I also feel like there are moments where this person catches themselves comparing their own growth to yours. Not in a negative way, more like motivation. Almost like your example encourages them to look at their own life differently, to ask bigger questions, to challenge old limitations, to believe they are capable of more than they once thought. And wow, that is such a powerful influence to have on another human being. especially when you're not even trying. Because I genuinely don't think Aquarius is intentionally teaching this person anything. You're simply living your life. You're simply becoming yourself. And somehow that's enough. That's what keeps standing out. You don't have to convince them of anything. Your actions have already spoken. Your growth has already spoken. Your authenticity has already spoken. And the Queen of Swords is sitting here with this calm, clear energy that feels unmistakably connected to you. I love this card in this reading because it feels like somebody finally seeing you accurately, not through fantasy, not through projection, not through wishful thinking, accurately. They see your softness, but they also see your boundaries. They see your kindness, but they also see your intelligence. They see your heart, but they also see your standards. And I think that's part of what makes this connection feel so significant to them. You're not somebody they can reduce to a simple description. Every time they think they've figured you out completely, another layer appears, another perspective appears, another dimension appears, and that keeps their attention. Because beneath all the admiration, there is still mystery. A healthy mystery, the kind that encourages curiosity rather than confusion. I keep sensing that this person feels proud of you, which is such a specific feeling, not possessive, not controlling, proud. Like they've witnessed pieces of your journey and genuinely appreciate how far you've come, even if they haven't been present for every chapter. And as these cards continue unfolding, I can't ignore the feeling that something inside this person is becoming increasingly difficult to keep hidden. Because admiration can remain silent for a while, respect can remain silent for a while, even longing can remain silent for a while. But eventually, emotions begin asking for expression. And the energy surrounding these cards feels like it's slowly approaching that threshold. Honestly, Aquarius, the energy feels very different here. The feeling I've been sitting with throughout this reading begins to gather momentum, not in a rushed way, not in a dramatic way. More like somebody reaching a point where staying silent requires more effort than speaking honestly. And the first card that catches my attention is the Fool. Wow. There is something incredibly refreshing about this energy, because for so long, this person seemed focused on understanding every possibility before allowing themselves to feel anything fully. They wanted certainty. They wanted reassurance. They wanted answers. Yet the Fool doesn't feel interested in collecting more answers. It feels interested in movement. I keep seeing somebody standing at the edge of a new chapter, looking out towards something unfamiliar. Not because they know exactly how everything unfolds, because they're becoming less afraid of not knowing. And honestly, that feels significant. Because fear has been part of this story for a while. Fear of vulnerability, fear of disappointment, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of feeling deeply, fear of wanting something they couldn't explain. But the energy around the Fool feels lighter, almost like somebody finally setting down a heavy bag they've been carrying for far too long. You know, I keep hearing the phrase, what if I stop overthinking this? Such a simple question, yet it feels powerful. Because I think this person is beginning to realize that not every meaningful experience arrives with instructions attached to it. Not every connection can be measured. Not every emotion can be solved like a puzzle. Some things have to be felt. And that's exactly where the Ace of Cups begins appearing. Okay, this card feels incredibly sincere, not loud, not overwhelming, sincere, like water slowly rising after a long period of drought. I keep getting the feeling that this person has been carrying emotions they haven't fully expressed, not because they're dishonest, not because they're playing games, because they genuinely needed time to understand themselves. There is a difference. Some people hide because they're avoiding the truth. This feels more like somebody slowly walking toward it. And the closer they get, the harder it becomes to pretend those feelings aren't there, because every road they've traveled inside themselves seems to bring them back to the same place, back to the same person, back to the same connection, back to Aquarius. And what fascinates me is that the energy feels softer than before. There isn't a struggle happening here. There isn't a battle. The resistance that once felt so strong seems much quieter. Almost like somebody who spent months swimming against a current only to discover they were exhausted from fighting it. I keep seeing a person sitting alone with their thoughts, smiling unexpectedly at a memory, a conversation, a laugh, a moment that felt small at the time but somehow became important later. And that's when I noticed the Lovers. Wow, the atmosphere changes immediately. Not because this card feels dramatic, because it feels honest. That's the word, honest. I think this person is beginning to recognize something they can no longer reduce to coincidence or curiosity. The connection feels meaningful to them, deeply meaningful, and what stands out most is the sense of choice surrounding this card. Because real feelings often ask people difficult questions questions about what they value, questions about who they want to become, questions about what truly matters. I feel like this person has been standing in front of those questions for a while, looking at them, reflecting on them, trying to understand them, and something inside them appears increasingly ready to stop avoiding the answers. Not perfect answers, not complete answers, just honest ones. And honestly, Aquarius, I think that's all the heart ever really asks for. Honesty, authenticity, presence. Because the heart doesn't always need certainty. Sometimes it simply needs courage. And that's where the Ace of Wands enters the reading. The energy shifts again. There is warmth here, excitement, a spark, a sense of possibility. I keep seeing somebody who has spent so much time observing from a distance that the idea of participation feels both exciting and terrifying. You know that feeling when you've rehearsed something in your mind 100 times? A conversation, a message, a confession, an invitation. And eventually there comes a moment where imagination can no longer substitute for action. That's what this energy feels like. Not impulsive, not reckless, alive, like a flame that has finally received enough oxygen to burn brighter. I think this person is becoming aware that watching from afar no longer satisfies them the way it once did. Observing isn't enough. Wondering isn't enough. Imagining isn't enough. Because emotions have a natural tendency to seek expression. They want movement. They want connection. They want authenticity. And that's what keeps standing out to me here. This person doesn't seem focused on creating a perfect outcome. They seem focused on creating a genuine experience. Something real. Something honest. Something that reflects what they've been carrying inside for so long. And, as I continue sitting with these cards, I can almost feel the shift happening within them. Not the shift of somebody becoming a different person. The shift of somebody becoming more themselves, more aligned with what they feel, more aligned with what they value, more aligned with what their heart has been trying to tell them all along. And Aquarius, there is something incredibly beautiful about witnessing somebody reach that point. The point where fear begins loosening its grip. The point where curiosity becomes courage. The point where possibility starts feeling a little more tangible than doubt. Because the story unfolding in these cards doesn't feel like it's searching for more explanations anymore. It feels like it's searching for a chance to be expressed. Aquarius, this reading keeps leaving me with one simple feeling. Not every connection enters our lives loudly. Some arrive quietly and slowly reveal their importance over time. If this message found you at the right moment, take whatever resonates and leave the rest. Trust your own heart above anything else. Thank you for sharing a little piece of your day with me. I never take your time, your energy, or your presence here for granted. And remember, sometimes the people who impact us the most are the ones who help us see ourselves more clearly. Sending you so much love. Take care of yourselves, my beautiful Aquarius friends, and I'll see you in the next reading. Okay, bye-bye.